So as we turn again to the second vision, the vision in chapter 8, second of the 4 visions at the end of the book, in the second half of the book of Daniel, we asked the question, how does chapter 8, with its 2 beasts, map on to chapter 7? And I mentioned that one view that's out there is that since chapter 7 never names the beasts, that we really shouldn't ourselves name the beasts. And as I would always say, it's a good reminder to be cautious about not adding what Scripture itself doesn't add. If Scripture doesn't name the beasts, then we should ourselves maybe be way more cautious in naming the beasts. So I respect this view, and I respect the sort of the cautious approach. However, we all know that in chapter 2, where there was this colossus, remember that? Way back in chapter 2, the colossus image of a giant man, and he divided into 4 parts with 4 different metals. It was a statue that represented the 4 kings and empires that would successively rule Israel, rule Jerusalem. And we were told at that time by Daniel, God speaking through Daniel to Nebuchadnezzar, he says to Nebuchadnezzar, "You are the head of gold." So there's no question that the head of gold on the Colossus is Nebuchadnezzar. So that as you then move down to the silver chest and arms and the bronze midriff and then the iron legs, that you expect that each of those different metals then are representing not Nebuchadnezzar, not the Babylonians, but different kings to come. Okay, whether that's different Babylonian kings at first, or whether that's representing whole empires into the future, which is the way we understood it, and generally it is understood, that they represent 4 different empires going on to the Romans. When then we come to chapter 7, where we were over here, there were no named beasts, but at the same time, we notice that the lion, with its unique drama, where it was a beast with its eagle's wings that got plucked, and then it stood up like a man, and it walked around like a man. And of course, it was very hard not to resist. We decided not to resist the temptation that it's a parallel. After all, remember, chapters 2 and 7 are themselves parallel in the book. So we thought the lion also represented Nebuchadnezzar and Babylon. And it was a fitting image, since lions are on the gates, the Ishtar gate, and since Nebuchadnezzar had been a beast living out in the field and then had become sort of humanized. Remember, he was given the mind of a man at the end of his 7 years of discipline. And so this seems to be a description of what happened to Nebuchadnezzar. Also, now we've learned that in chapter 8, 2 of these beasts are specifically named empires. We have Persia first, and then Greece. They come up right in the middle of the chapter. The interpretation is given exactly which empires these are. So we have another place where we're not left in the dark, and we're to know which empires these are. So I would like to suggest that the 4 beasts are representing the 4 same kingdoms that we saw in the Colossus image in chapter 2, since the chapters and their particular images are running parallel in the structure of the book. So that would mean we have then most likely the Babylonians, followed by the Persians, followed by the, here's a nice little map for you. We have the Babylonians, followed by the Persians, followed by the Greeks, followed by the Romans. And indeed, you can see here roughly from 600 down to about the time of Jesus, these are the 4 major empires that rule Israel until that time. Now, what that would mean is that if the Persians are the second beast, represented in chapter 7 by this giant bear, it sort of makes sense that they would be a bear, because After all, they were a large, lumbering, powerful empire, very large, but also in their own way kind of lumbering, not known for their speed with which they fought their battles. And then when you get to the next empire, the Greeks, they're represented by a leopard. That's a leopard. You see there with the 4 heads, and it has wings, and the whole idea 4 wings, and the whole idea is that this represents Greece, because not only are leopards stealthy and smart, which the Greeks under Alexander were exceptionally gifted intellectual in their strategies and so on, their logistics and the way they approached war, and then also Alexander with unprecedented velocity attacked the Persian Empire and took over Persia within a decade. Really less than a decade. It was just astounding how fast that he moved. And of course, the Greeks and Persians, by the way, they fought each other at rivers, just as there were a number of famous battles at rivers, like the Granicus River and so on, it's fitting that they end up showing up in chapter 8, the ram and the goat fighting over the banks there of the water. All right, now the question is then, where does the goat and ram fit in? Well, obviously, they would fit in here. They would be another beast representing the same Persian Empire. But now notice the similarities between the ram and the bear relative to the goat and the leopard, because the ram is also much larger than the goat. He's much heavier, much larger, but also not the sharpest knife in the drawer. He's not known for his wits any more than a bear is. And then when you get to the goat, which is known for its wits, it parallels the leopards, which are smart and stealthy. And of course, the goat isn't just smart, but as we're going to see, he's very deceptive and deceiving and manipulative. So he's similar to a leopard in that way. And of course, just as the leopard had its 4 heads, so the goat ends up at first with its 1 horn, and then eventually there will be 4 horns that are coming out of the head of the goat, because it represents the Greeks, who had these 4 parts of the Alexandrian Empire and their 4 kings. All right, so it appears anyway that these overlap, they map on very naturally. The animals, the beasts parallel one another, but the reason there's a different set of beasts in chapter 8 is not just because they're different. It's not because they're different empires. It's because it is a way to highlight slightly differently the features that they have, and why that is relevant to the particular vision and the things that unfold in that vision. Now, we have a question, which is, what are we going to do with the little horn? Because you may recall that we have this little horn that comes up right here. I'll just kind of draw it here. It's after the 4 horns, right? There's this little horn comes up. But in chapter 7, we're told that the little horn comes up here in the 4th beast. One is the 4th beast. Remember, he triggers the end of history and or of the end of this age, when Christ will return and judge him. So how could you have a little horn here, but then, that's the 4th beast, of course, also have the little horn here on the 3rd beast, which clearly are the Greeks? How could the little horn be in 2 different empires? Does that mean we've gotten everything wrong? No, it doesn't. But how are we going to explain that? Well, we'll try to square that up next time. That's for you to try and think about. How would you go about explaining that these little horns, which are on different beasts, at one representing Greece, one representing Rome, how could that be? What does that mean, in other words? Well, it certainly would mean on its face that they're probably not the same figure in each vision. That though there's a little horn in chapter 7 on the fourth beast and a little horn in chapter 8 on the third beast, they must not be the same king, even though they're both depicted by little horns. But then that's no surprise, because the big horns have depicted many different kings between the different beasts. Every big horn isn't representing the same person. So why should we assume the little horn is always representing the same king? It's not. So that's at least a little hint of where we're going with this, is how are we going to square up, how are we going to explain this, these two little horns. Also reference just on the side that the little horn here involving the Greeks is actually described at length in the book 1 Maccabees chapter 1. The king, his name to history is Antiochus IV Epiphanes. That's the little horn in chapter 8. So you can read up about him a little bit in 1 Maccabees. I don't think that's the key to being able to square up and explain who he is. If you want a little hint on that, I would highly recommend that you read Matthew 24, 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. All right? And how do they handle the little horn? Those are going to be the key New Testament passages that sort of resolve how these two little horns relate to one another. So best wishes, and we'll see you next time.